must meet the girl soon. Barbara gave a languid stretch, arching her back to display her breast to best advantage. He had already capitulated to her demands once, but Barbara was never satisfied for long. She had come to his rooms before he could even unpack his bag and had nearly torn his clothes off in a lust-inspired frenzy. "I believe I have." Hadley ignored the blatant invitation for a second course, threw his legs over the side of the bed, and pulled his shirt on over his head. "How so? When?" she demanded. "This morning, shortly after my arrival, in the music room. She was receiving most ineffectual dance instruction. But Monsieur Gaspard is the best, at dancing anyway. Unfortunately, his lack of inches makes him quite inadequate in other capacities." She rose and pressed her breast to Hadley's back, stretching her arms about his waist and licking the shell of his ear. Once that might have driven him near insane, but now it was just faintly annoying. He gently but firmly disentangled himself and continued dressing. Nevertheless, he had her so agitated the poor thing was positively tripping over herself. "But that's only her natural predisposition," Barbara laughed. "Didn't I tell you what a coarse creature she is? I despair she'll ever be ready to present. 'Tis a good thing you are arrived. Mayhap we can now forgo the certain fiasco of taking her out into society. Perhaps her manners and deportment lack refinement, but there's nothing coarse about the girl. To be frank, I thought her artlessness rather refreshing." He smiled inwardly at their moment of ludicrous laughter at the dancing master's expense. He couldn't recall the last time he chuckled so naturally and spontaneously. "That's absurd. You can't be saying you're taken with her, Hadley." Something in this expression made Barbara's gaze narrow. "Well, I suppose it's best if she doesn't altogether repulse you. It will facilitate the task at hand." "And what task is that?" he asked. He had far more important matters on his mind, like how to secure a loan and garner sufficient support to petition the king. Perhaps he would do better to try the Queen. Walpole had managed to run the country through her, and Hadley could charm the petticoats off any woman. Why would a young and reasonably attractive queen prove any different? "Darling, I never thought you obtuse. You must wed the chit before someone else claims her fortune." "Wed her?" The words jarred him out of his ruminations. "Is your mind disordered of a sudden, Barbara? I have no plans to wed anyone, ever." She gave him a petulant look. "But how else do you suppose we're to get our hands on her money?" "Is that the scheme you had in mind when you wrote me? To bilk an unwary young heiress of her fortune?" "Brilliant, isn't it?" she laughed. "I told you I'd discovered a means of getting it all back, and so much more. She's exceedingly rich, and once we have the money, it should be no trouble at all to secure the influence needed to restore your title." "How much?" he asked, veiling his interest. "What is the girl actually worth?" She crawled onto his lap and laved her tongue up his neck. "That information will come at a price." She was begging to be taken again, and Hadley felt nothing. Or rather nothing but an immense sense of relief that he was over her. He jerked his head away. "I'm not in the mood for any more games." "Pity," she pouted. "Have you another lover now, Hadley? Or perhaps you've developed a penchant for Venice's unnatural pleasures. Most well-traveled men do, you know. And I confess your valet was an exceptionally pretty creature." "How much?" he repeated icily, ignoring her insinuation. She sighed. "I can't begin to tell you how much work that took to discover. Sir Richard is tediously protective of her assets." "Sir Richard? What is he to do with this?" Hadley demanded. "Darling," she rolled her eyes, "that same obnoxious bore. Did I tell you the girl is his ward?" "That girl is Sir Richard's ward?" When the girl in the music room had introduced herself as Mary Elizabeth Edwards, he'd not made the connection. But then again, wily Sir Richard had taken care not to reveal anything about the Edwards heir. "One and the same, my love, and worth every bit of 50,000 a year. That plump little pigeon is one of the richest women in England, and thanks to me, she's yours for the plucking." The blood roared in his ears. It was just too bloody good to be true. The very one who held his lands was residing under Barbara's roof. The girl was not only the means to a large fortune, but also of revenge. That certainly does throw a different light on matters. He took heed not to betray his growing excitement. "But you and I both know Sir Richard would have me hanged before granting consent for me to wed his ward." She smiled. "Who said anything about seeking his consent?" "You intend for me to despoil her, to force a marriage? My dear Barbara, such crude and crass methods just don't suit me at all. The entire thing lacks finesse." She scowled. Then how else do you propose we get control of her fortune? I would propose gaining the girl's good faith and cooperation. And then what? Do you think she'll just hand it over to you? Something very close to that. You're overly confident. Not at all, he laughed. I've never failed to achieve my object where a woman was concerned, nor has any ever complained of my methods.